The Phil Harris story, roles and responsibilities of repair certifiers, a poignant reminder. Back in 2022, repair certifier Phil Harris, his wife Jo, and two other family members were travelling together in Phil's almost new Ford Ranger when they were involved in a major head-on collision with another vehicle. All four occupants of the Ford Ranger suffered moderate to serious injuries, while the driver and sole occupant of the other vehicle, an older model Honda Odyssey, was fatally injured. Although his injuries were severe, at one point life-threatening, and he faced a long road to recovery, Phil came to the realisation that the primary reason he and his fellow passengers survived the impact was because they were in a vehicle equipped with the very latest occupant protection technologies. With Phil being a repair certifier himself and having now experienced firsthand how these complex, modern and constantly evolving active and passive occupant protection systems saved his life, he reached out to Repair Cert New Zealand to tell his story and remind repair certifiers and the wider repair industry the importance of performing correct repair processes and fully reinstating all occupant protection and safety systems on collision-damaged vehicles. Phil's message. With vehicle manufacturers' safe tolerances becoming ever more refined, failure to identify and restore a damaged vehicle's safety-critical occupant protection systems in strict accordance with the vehicle manufacturer's requirements may mean the vehicle will not perform as the vehicle manufacturer intended in another collision. Essentially, this could be the difference between life and death.
It was the technology that saved our lives, and luckily we were in a brand new Ford Ranger Ute. And as a certifier, I started analysing the impact of all this, and it sort of scared me about repairing cars and how critical it is to have everything work as the manufacturer designed it. The tolerances that we're working with are getting smaller and smaller, and you think about when we first started. I remember fixing mainframe chassis. I think if I remember right, we sort of worked within 15 mils, and then we sort of got down to 5 mil tolerances, and now we're getting down to 0 tolerances, and so, without a well set up workshop and well trained people, it's getting harder to achieve those. New Zealand's sort of been built on the number 8 wire thing, but it doesn't cut it anymore in this modern world. We've got to get a lot more professional at what we're doing, a lot more smarter, a lot more clearer with our instructions. So it's easy for me to say these things afterwards, because I've been involved. Up until my accident, I was just a normal certifier going about my daily business and doing the best job that I knew. So, and you think about that, and then going through what we went through, it changes your perspective on life and what you do out there on a daily basis. So, I've gone on to buy a more later model vehicle again to what I had, and the technology's shifted within 12 months. It's not slowing down, it's not going away, it's getting more intense.
So did it make you think that if you were in a brand new vehicle, obviously undamaged, has featured all that technology, but was it running through your mind that you could have been repair certifying one of those vehicles that was a statutory write-off from Australia, and then would it necessarily have been repaired correctly?
Well, put it this way, and this is, if I'm going to buy a new late model Ute, and I've got a stat write-off over here that's been repaired, and I've got a brand new one here. Which one am I going to choose? Well, it's a no-brainer. I'm going to take the new one every time. I might pay a few more dollars than the other one, but I lessen the risk, and it's the variables, or did that guy do that calibration right? Is that bracket that holds that camera back to manufacturer spec? is that bumper clipped on properly, or is it urethane on? You know, this it goes on and on and on.
That's it, even at a reasonably, some of that you could argue is a reasonably minor level,
Yeah.
but let alone putting welds into a chassis and replacing components with second-hand bits and not maybe adhering to the proper method of reattachment for structural parts that's been poorly repaired or whatever. That changes the whole perception about how that vehicle is going to be repaired now, isn't it? That would be fair to say, but
Oh, absolutely. You know, for a certifier to have the responsibility of achieving that is there's too many variables. There's all those sort of things that are going on, and it's just a lack of knowledge and training. You've got to be one step ahead to be able to relay that information back to your repairer, because they're only guided by your advice at the end of the day.
Repair certifiers should ask themselves, are the vehicles that I'm repair certifying be repaired in accordance with the repair rule, and have I done my due diligence in determining that these repairs are safe and compliant? A step-by-step record, data recovered from Phil's Ford Ranger's ECM. From 5 seconds before, leading up to and immediately after the impact event. At 5 seconds before impact, the vehicle is travelling at 94 kilometres per hour, just under the posted speed limit of 100 kilometres per hour. At this time, the driver has 9% input on the accelerator pedal, and the active safety control systems, the traction control and ABS, are active but not engaged. At 2 seconds before impact, engine RPM drops as accelerator input returns to 0%, and there is a slight change in steering direction, most likely because the driver has detected something in the road ahead and is beginning to make the complex decision of braking and turning. At 1.6 seconds before impact, the brake pedal is depressed and speed continues to drop. While the driver has reacted and started to brake, they haven't jammed the brakes on at this point. There is some small steering input to the right. At 0.9 seconds before impact, with brakes now jammed on, ABS is now active and speed drops quickly, 15 kilometres per hour in 0.2 seconds to around 77 kilometres per hour. Right up to 0 seconds, the reduction in speed is still consistent with braking, so SRS sensors and modules don't activate or deploy any safety restraints or airbags. At 0 seconds, the moment of impact, or time zero, is when the vehicle's parameters are met to activate the safety devices. Speed is dropped to 59 kilometres per hour. The vehicle's sensors detect a sudden and significant dramatic change in deceleration rate as the two vehicles come together, over 13 kilometres per hour in a millisecond, and SRS devices are activated. The following times record how long it took for the various SRS to activate or fire after time zero and are measured in milliseconds. For reference, it takes 100 milliseconds to blink. At 10 milliseconds, the seatbelt pre-tensioners activate. At 14 milliseconds, the frontal airbags deploy. At 35.5 milliseconds, the side airbags deploy. Other data recorded after time zero. The vehicle tipped slightly, but not enough to activate any of the remaining airbags and restraints. A fuel supply cut-off signal was sent to the fuel pumps after 30 milliseconds. Interestingly, the occupants would not yet have realised what was going on in the total elapsed time of 35.5 milliseconds it took for the restraints, airbags and other safety systems to activate.
We impacted, and the impact was huge. Just that impact coming through your body was just, it's really intense. And then what happened, I felt the vehicle myself, I felt it went up into the air, and my feeling was, don't roll, don't roll. That's a feeling I got inside of me, and then it just went down. And then I just sat there, and it was just white.
White?
White. And I'm pretty sure like that was the airbag. And I was just like cocooned in my seat. And I thought, well, I'm alive, I'm still here. And then I not long afterwards, started to hear the noises of my passengers. And that was hard. It was the hardest thing to comprehend, because I knew I was alive, but the noises they were making, I didn't know whether I were dying or surviving.
A closer look at how collision energy was managed in the full frame chassis and upper unibody of Phil's Ford Ranger. The full frame chassis. The left front crush zone portion or frame end and the front impact beam collapse completely and skew across to the right. Direct and indirect impact forces push the front chassis crossmember and right front frame end across to the right, splitting open the welded connections of the frame end and buckling the front section of the chassis side frame, forward of the front chassis crossmember. On the left-hand side, unabsorbed collision energy progresses rearward, collapsing and splitting welds in the front section of the chassis side frame, at and rearward of the areas where the front chassis crossmember attaches. The kick-up area of the left-hand chassis side frame, directly behind the front wheel, buckles dramatically from still more unabsorbed collision energy. The chassis side frame behind the kick-up area on the right-hand side buckles slightly from the transfer of collision energy. Direct impact to the left front wheel buckles the left front steering and suspension components, driving them rearward and into the A-pillar and floor of the upper body. No further damage to the full frame chassis is evident rearward of the transmission crossmember, apart from the spare wheel carrier frame, which is buckled from the inertial weight of the spare wheel. Using the yellow horizontal line as reference, this image clearly shows the substantial amount of collapse and deformation of the front chassis frame on the left-hand side from collision energy transfer and absorption. The upper unibody. The entire front compartment collapses and is driven backwards into the bulkhead and firewall on the left-hand side. The bulkhead and firewall absorb collision energy before moving rearward and buckling the A-pillar and upper screen pillar, displacing and buckling the left-hand doors and bending the B-pillar. At cabin floor level, the left front portion of the inner and outer sill structures, the front footwell, floor braces, stiffeners and centre tunnel buckle dramatically. Collision energy continues along the left-hand side aperture, severely buckling and splitting welded seams on the inner and outer C-pillars. The entire upper unibody has moved rearward and across on the full frame chassis, damaging mounting brackets, bolts and insulators. The steering wheel is now touching the dashboard as a result of substantial collapse of the steering column. As a result of the restrained occupants being thrown violently forward in the impact, the front and rear seat frames, tracks and lower squabs have collapsed and buckled. Collision parameters were not met to deploy the driver's side curtain airbag. The transmission and four-wheel drive transfer cases are extensively fractured and split open. The engine sump and bell housing are also badly damaged. The drive shafts, universal joints and mountings are all severely displaced. The power steering rack is also fractured in several places. Both front engine mount bolts have sheared off.
So, I can't emphasise enough that it come very apparent to all of us that were in that vehicle that it was the safety features that the manufacturer had that saved our lives. I used to often say to repairers, and especially if they're challenging me on how we should be doing it, are you prepared to put your children in this vehicle, your family, and be happy with it?